Hello everyone and welcome back to Experience Kills. And with this video, of course, I'm joined by my partner in crime, Richard.
No crimes, it's all legal. Hello.
I don't believe that for a second. Not even a second. But we are super excited to finally be here talking about the full release of Metro Exodus. We launched Experience Kills with an exclusive hands-on preview of Metro Exodus that I was able to do in London a little over a month ago, and it's really cool that we can come now with a full review. It's a bit later than I would have liked, but me and Richard really wanted to put the time into the game, so we're coming now with a in-depth discussion around Metro Exodus. And I guess I should start with a brief explanation of what Metro Exodus is. It's the third part in a trilogy of games made by 4A, and it follows the story of Achim, who is this survivor of a big nuclear war, and it's all set in Russia, and the first two games are all set in the Metro underground rail system. But obviously with Exodus, which you may have guessed from the name, things are changing up. We are moving out of the Metro, out into the big Russian open world, and giving you all the kind of combat opportunities that kind of game development and that kind of progress would, make possible. So yeah, is that a fair description? I think without hitting any spoilers, as it were?
I think that sounds about right, yeah.
And I mean, so the game starts in Moscow.
Yeah.
Without spoiling the story specifics, because this is a review, how did you find the setup that got us out into the wider world?
It took me a little bit by surprise, because all of the discussion we've had about this and the footage that we've seen really is selling the open world environment of Metro on next generation consoles. So it was a bit disarming really to see it go back to its old roots, foraging round the Metro tunnels in the dark, cobwebs everywhere, seeing what sort of creatures scuttle out at you, and what Metro's always been about. So it was a nice introduction to what Metro has been in the past, with all the advances that we've got with Xbox One X, which we're both playing on, and just how astounding that looks. And when you finally do get out into the open world, my word, it's just something special, isn't it?
It looks incredible. I think for a game striving for this sort of bleak realism, it absolutely captures it. I think, while not maybe like Western AAA perfect, things like the facial animations and the character models are so much better than they were in the previous games. It's really stepped up the immersion from that. I think it really helps with the storytelling. I will say I thought the narrative device to get us out into Russia proper was a bit odd. It felt kind of rushed, and it felt a little bit like, well, why characters and things turn here that didn't feel like were true to the characters as they were portrayed in the previous games. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Do you think so? What do you mean in terms of the pacing?
No, it was just in the terms of this kind of almost a Deus Ex Machina element of, oh, that's why we've not been able to communicate with anybody. And actually, it's difficult to talk about without spoilers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess in a way, it was like the grand concept here was we want to get people out in the open as quick as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's not dwell too long in Moscow. And I think by the point of where, you get out, especially into the second big world, and revelations upon revelations happen within the story, it definitely helps contextualize the previous story beats and narrative, and it gets better as it goes along.
Right.
And I think this is probably the best Metro narrative that we've had yet, best story that we've had yet. I certainly feel like I've got to know the characters more than I ever have before, not just Anna, for example. I've actually got to know the rest of the Spartans, and I've got to know Miller, and you get to meet loads of new characters as well. And I think Artyom, even though he's a sort of a silent protagonist, except for narrating the loading screens, I understand him better than I ever have as well. And that's definitely a step up from the story, and specifically Last Light. I think Metro, the first game, it was much better than Last Light for story, and this is better than both of the previous titles.
I think that comes out of the new format in a lot of ways. So the open world format that we're playing in now allows Artyom to be more persistently present within a community of characters, where previously he was funneled through literal tunnels, and you'd sort of chance upon other characters as and when the narrative saw fit. But now that's much more organic, so you can dash back to see how people are getting on, within the safe area of particular levels, and then go out and explore. And they'll usually have something different to say when you pop back, or there'll be something different happening. So it does feel much more fleshed out in that way.
It feels very organic. There's no walk up to a person and hit A to talk to them. They'll just start a conversation with the person next to them or with you and stuff, and just include you in whatever's going on back at camp and stuff. And there are a few things, for example, it's not a big spoiler, but you can find a guitar in the Volga, and that becomes sort of a social thing that happens later on in the game, where you can play guitar with people and on your downtime do a little bit of music and stuff, and it just helps flesh everything out and really grow those characters in a really compelling way. It was actually quite surprising, because it's not something I got any hands on with anything like that at the preview event. They were very purposefully keeping that away from that, so really getting to immerse myself in the sort of ongoing trials and tribulations of Artyom and Anna. Specifically, they're definitely at the core of the story, but yeah, there is a really nice supporting cast that I had a lot of fun with. Obviously, story is a big part of my enjoyment with games, and I believe your enjoyment with games as well, Richard, so it's definitely added to the experience. But let's talk about these open worlds, because it's not an open world in a Ubisoft sense of millions of icons and silly tasks to go and do. It's just a large environment that feels very realistic, that you can explore at your own pace, as I know you've spent a long time, for example, in the first area. And there is so much in there. There is so much environmental storytelling, like every building you go into, how it's destroyed, how the survivors are, maybe not necessarily survivors, I should say, the bodies are laid out, all the survivors and stuff like that, all tells a story as to what happened in that location. And it feels a bit like Half-Life 2 in that regard.
Oh wow, I was going to say exactly the same thing, because I think it's the first time since Half-Life 2 probably where I've felt that there's been a world that has both a sense of desolation but also a richness of detail that it feels absolutely lived in. This really is up there with Half-Life 2. I'm glad you said that. It's funny that we both thought the same.
And much like Half-Life 2, there's a beauty to it, isn't there? In that desolation and in that, because it's in many respects, the environment has taken back the world from civilization. So you get a lot of rundown buildings. You get a lot of, especially in the later levels, nature reclaiming things. You get a lot of, you do see very much the impact, and I mean that in a literal sense, of the war, with craters where nukes have gone off, and how that's altered the environment and altered not just the creatures in it but the survivors as well. Sometimes that storytelling is subtle, and sometimes it hits you in the head with armies of cannibals, and that's definitely enjoyable as well. So yeah, I mean the environment is a big win as well. How have you found something I really enjoyed in this is the gunplay, because the gunplay is quite unforgiving, and it's also sort of attempts realism in the fact that just because you've lined up a headshot doesn't mean you're going to hit it every time. Yeah, I found that when sniping particularly, it's very unreliable, but in a way that feels right. Well, I think what you should say actually is it's sniping when you're not using a proper sniper weapon, but you've just put a scope on a gun. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you put your 8 or the 6x scope on an AK, or the Kalash as it's called in this, you can see and you can shoot, but there is, if you're getting out to long ranges with it, it's not going to be reliable. So you really need to use the sniper rifle or the pneumatic rifle if you want precision over distance, which I think is really cool. Yeah, and I have found that. I don't think I've found the sniper rifle, so I've been struggling with the long distance shots. However, I am enjoying the gunplay and how it makes you sort of scavenge for materials to craft ball bearings for that pneumatic gun, and just
ransack bodies, looking through containers. It has a feeling of Fallout as well, you know, in the way that you've just got to scour every corner for the things that you need. But more than Fallout, it does feel like a fully detailed environment, not just a sort of huge map with stuff dropped into it, you know.
I really enjoy the scavenging. I really like, it's not overly complicated. I like how on the fly, I was whipping out my backpack and changing attachments depending on the combat environment I was in. Am I trying to be silent? Has it already gone to shit? If so, take off the silencer, put on a long barrel for extra damage, that kind of thing, and just start wrecking house. You do it more and more, and it's, to be honest, there's so much crafting materials in this game. Really, you should just be spending them buying yourself those med kits, buying yourself the filters, building as much ammunition as you need to experience and play with the varied arsenal. You're never going to be short on this stuff, because every combat experience, when you've killed a guy, he will give you resources if you loot the body. So there's always plenty of material to really facilitate that kind of sandbox experience, and that's what it comes down to a lot of the time. Even in the story missions, when you're actually being driven through the narrative, you can basically approach every combat environment how you want to. Do you want to have 2 shotguns? Do you want to just be silent and deadly? Do you want to be just knocking out the enemies? You can really choose what you want to do, and that is something I absolutely love in this game, and it means the replayability is going to be massive as well.
That said, I think you do need to be careful with what you use. It does give you enough to manage, but there's always that sense that if you just go crazy, then you're going to get yourself into trouble, particularly because it does feel like quite a large environment, and you're never quite sure how far you're going to need to go on what you've currently got in your backpack.
Kind of like I always have like a little invisible line in my mind that I will keep, you know, X amount of when shit hits the fan. If I need to make a couple of health kits quickly, I'll always want to keep enough to be able to pull that off. Do you know? So that sort of management, isn't it? But you start to really understand the rhythm of the game and the kind of the balance that is at play here, from just getting in there and just experiencing it. It's for example, I much like when I did the preview, I really enjoy using that pneumatic rifle. Because it's super versatile and it's a brilliant weapon that you can sometimes forget you even have, but it's actually really effective because it's a really good long-range single-shot weapon. It's a really good close-up rapid-fire weapon if you need it to be, and it's the easiest thing to craft more ammunition for on the go, because you can make the ball bearings anywhere. So it's really good in a pinch, that gun. I really enjoy that. And there's just loads of variety. I mean, as you go through the game, more and more weapons, more and more upgrade parts become available, and just continuously building that arsenal to just have fun. That's what it feels like. While it's got this sense of desolation and realism, it really feels just like a fun sandbox to be in and to mess around in.
It is fun, but I think the overriding sense for me is that it's an intimidating environment.
Really? You find it a bit oppressive?
Yeah, I think so. Because there's no end of things that are going to come after you, and it's not like the old Metro where you could manage the environment a bit more easily. You've got sections in this that are really quite open. You might be walking through a boggy area. Maybe you're like on a little island with a load of those massive dog things roaming about. Maybe they'll attack you, maybe they won't, and if they do, you're kind of stuck with how far you can outrun them because they're quicker than you. So it can be intimidating.
What difficulty are you playing it on?
Normal.
Okay, me too. I mean, the thing that I found is the quick save is invaluable.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So before I go into a combat encounter, or I know I'm coming up on an enemy encampment, or to be honest, just when I'm walking around, every 10 minutes or so, I just hit start, quick save. It's straight away, you can create yourself a checkpoint without any worries. And I think that's a very conscious design decision.
Yeah, it's not that it's hard and that I'm getting killed left, right and centre. I've been fine so far. It's just that feeling of, I probably need to be a bit careful here. And
I find myself saving before an outpost or something, and then I'll go in and attempt it one way, and then I'll just reload and do it a different way just to see how it felt, if it was a different couple of guns I wanted to try out or something like that, and just experimenting with those sandboxes. it's just really good fun to try because the guns play so differently. Like the way the shotgun is, that I've got multiple assault rifles and shotguns now, multiple different kinds of rifles and sniper rifles and stuff like that. So there's just so many different ways, because you've only got a loadout capacity of 2 guns, and then the pneumatic rifle is standard. And it's just so much fun to experiment with that. It's interesting. I don't really find it oppressive. I guess like there's darkness and it's a bit sinister and a bit maybe like overbearing in story sometimes, and it does feel like, oh god, everything's gone to shit. However, like the actual combat, the actual gameplay, I just find like a really good time. I don't know if that's weird or what, but I love it. So cool.
I found it's got some pretty good scares in there. I mean, it feels on a level with. We've recently played Resident Evil 2, the remake, and it's got a similar vibe to that, even though it couldn't be further apart in terms of environment. It's as open as you like. But some of the scares that I've had, like walking into old wrecks of buildings and then suddenly one of those cannibal fellas will suddenly jump out. It's got some good scares on me so far. There was one particular one, in the first open area, what's it called, the Volgar?
Yeah.
There's a section where you've got to drop down into sort of a, what's it called? It's like a little quarantine area, isn't it? Like a chemical facility.
Yeah.
And you've got to drop down into it. I didn't realise you had to drop down into it until I was running backwards from some of those beasts and just fell down the hole backwards while they're chasing down above me. And it was just such a cinematic experience to sort of fall through that. And what's the woman's name? Is it Anna?
Yeah.
Just sort of falling on top of her in the same way that she must have fallen down. It was just a beautiful moment. And I thought, that's proper emergent sort of horror jump scares that you don't see pulled off very well, and it just sort of happened.
It didn't happen to me that way at all, but I'd already been through that area and cleared out all the monsters, so when I came back for the objective, I just found the hole and just dropped down. I was like, hey, what's up? I think some people have been criticizing it for the up close combat it's easy to miss and to go through a lot of your ammunition, but I think it's a design choice. Much like being able to quick save before, you should be quick saving all the time. It's all about, when the shit goes, hits the fan, and you are scrambling and you are flailing, then you're not going to be as accurate and you're not going to be as controlled with your guns. And I think that's intentional.
I think it is, and it's consistent with the approach to how you scavenge and maintain materials, your crafting materials. It's all about management of what you've got and what's around you, and that extends to the combat as well. If you're in a situation where you're flailing at close range to try and take out 2-3 enemies, that's your fault for getting in that position in the first place. It's not going to reward you with ultra accurate close range gunplay. That's not what it's about. You should be managing your way into that situation in the first place.
I think the previous game, it sets up Artyom as a bit of like an unstoppable tank due to the way that game's designed. But several times throughout the story, Miller actually makes a point of calling you Special Forces. And that's what you're meant to be. You're meant to be a scalpel. You're meant to be surgical, controlling the battlefield, using darkness as your ally, and really stealthily taking down enemies. I can't imagine ever having a primary build without a silenced weapon always to hand. Be it a rifle, pistol, the pneumatic weapon, anything. I'll always be going into combat with that first. So, one question for you, because there has been reports of stability issues. Have you had any technical problems when playing Metro?
No, not one. It's been absolutely fine.
Just for the sake of honesty and clarity, I have had a couple of hard locks which required a full shutting down of the game. That didn't really hamper my enjoyment too much because I'm saving, as I've said, pretty much constantly. I think the game has a couple of stability issues. It's very ambitious. This is made by a relatively small studio. They've really shot for the moon with this game. It's completely different to the ones they've made before. It could do with a patch or two, I think. I had a couple of weird issues where I'd fire my gun and like the audio cue would come in late, just enough to be noticeable. Do you know what I mean? Like you'd fire the weapon, but you'd get the sound of the weapon firing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like it's desynced a little bit. So I mean, there do seem to be a few minor issues, but for the most part, I think the game, it runs really, really well. It looks incredible. The gun sounds and all the audio design. I play it with headphones on because I find it like incredibly immersive. The audio design in this.
Yeah.
Really, just the sound of those guns sound meaty and heavy, and the monsters creeping up on you, and yeah, it just really puts you in the environment, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've not tried with headphones yet, but I can believe it. I mean,
I'd give it a go. I believe it supports Dolby Atmos as well, but I don't have that. I wish I did.
Oh, cool. I've got Dolby Atmos, but I haven't really got the ideal speaker set up to test it properly. But yeah, maybe I'll give that a go. But yeah, I can believe it. Just the presentation of this game overall is astounding. You said it's from a small team. You wouldn't know it because it's really up there with the best that I've seen on Xbox One X. It's a incredible.
Relatively small team. It's like 150 people. I mean, it's not like tiny. It's not an indie, but at the same time, it's not
on
Ubisoft,
the same level as exactly.
You know? Yeah, it's not 2,000 people. So yeah, I think it's a real accomplishment. It's, to me, one of the best first-person shooters sat on the Xbox right now, and also kind of one of the best open-world games as well.
Yeah. If you want something to explore and just marvel at an environment, it's so good. I mean, just looking at how HDR looks in this game, it's a reason to. It's been a long time since I've said this, but you know, it's sort of it's a reason to have HDR. There aren't many games that you think are worth it, but it's absolutely beautiful on this. We haven't really talked about the night and day cycle, have we?
We haven't. You can bring it up if you like. Yeah, it affects gameplay quite a lot, actually, depending on the enemies that come out.
Exactly. Yeah. So we talked about how Artyom needs to use darkness to his benefit. We haven't had this in previous Metro games, but there is a night and day cycle in Exodus, and when you're playing in these open environments and you've got the facility to sort of go into safe houses and sleep off the night until it gets light again, or you can just explore at night and try and keep your head down and take out enemies while they're unawares. That's really interesting in terms of the tactics that you can use. That's a new element to the series.
But the problem about going around at night is that all the creatures come out.
All the creatures come out, exactly. But just how that looks is astounding. When you see the sun come up in the morning, or when there's a storm. Have you seen the storms? And you see the sun like shining through the clouds and all the rain lashing down. I've never seen anything as good as this in terms of weather effects.
One of the really standout moments for me was I was completely blinded. So I was on the second level, which is all in the desert. And I was driving the vehicle in that level, and I came over like a hill, and the sun was directly in my eyes, and I just couldn't see anything, until my eyes adjusted. I literally couldn't see where I was driving, and it felt very realistic. It felt like, you're in this desert, sun-bleached world, and that's what would happen. You would be completely disorientated by it. And it really is part of the experience. Yeah, it's an incredibly technically impressive game, considering where they've come from. I can't believe it. I absolutely adore this game. And yeah, I can't wait to get on my second playthrough and just try everything different. And yeah, there's so much variety to the environments. Obviously, I've been talking a lot with Richard here specifically about the Volga, but I don't want to give away too many spoilers. But there are stuff that I showed in the preview. I talked about in the preview that there are the sun-bleached Caspian area, then there's the forested taiga area, and then there are some other areas that hitherto have not been shown or announced. So you need to get to those yourself. But there is a huge amount of variety in the look and the activities that you can do basically in these sandboxes. So yeah, big thumbs up from there for this. Huge recommendation from me. Yeah,
me too. I'm hoping it doesn't get buried because it's coming out amidst some other big names. We've had Apex Legends free to play in the past couple of weeks. We've got Anthem coming out this week properly. I'd encourage everyone not to pass this by. Get it while it's hot. It's a fantastic game.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a quality single player experience. So what that does mean is, if you don't have time for it right now, and you want to get on your Anthems and your Apex Legends and stuff, which is all about getting on board when the multiplayer's hot, this will wait, you can pick it up later and you can still have an amazingly immersive experience. So yeah,
you can, but don't. I'd rather people didn't wait till it was dirt cheap because no one's bought it.
Yeah, support it. Support Foray. Absolutely, yeah. So that is another episode of Experience Kills. We were talking about Metro Exodus. If you it was a long one. That's probably the longest one we've done. And if you can't, face sitting here and watching a video for nearly half an hour, and you'd rather listen to this on the bus or whatever on the way to work, you can do that. You can subscribe on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify, and you can also subscribe directly through the RSS feed. All the links will be in the YouTube description. So yeah, I mean, if you'd rather consume it that way, please do. And by all means, leave us some feedback on the YouTube comments or tweet at us at Experience Kills. Richard, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me as usual. We'll speak to you next time.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.